Thank you so much for this extraordinary welcome. I know it took a few years, but as president, I try to keep my promises. And I said I was going to come, and I'm here. So, and everybody, go ahead and have a seat. I'm going to be talking for a while. Relax. I want to thank my sister Alma for a wonderful introduction. I'm so glad that she could be with us here today, and it was, as she said, it was Alma who first guided me through Kenya almost 30 years ago. I am proud to be the first American president to come to Kenya. And of course, I'm the first Kenyan American to be president of the United States. That goes without saying. As Alma was saying, the first time I came to Kenya, things were a little different. When I arrived at Kenyatta Airport, the airline had lost my bags. That doesn't happen on Air Force One. They always have my luggage on Air Force One. As she said, Alma picked me up in an old Volkswagen Beetle. And I think the entire stay I was here, it broke down 4 or 5 times. We'd be on the highway, we'd have to call the Joakali. He'd bring his tools. We'd be sitting there waiting. And I slept on a cot in her apartment. We were drinking tea and eating ugali, and sukuma wiki, and so there wasn't a lot of luxury. Sometimes the lights would go out. They still do, is that what someone said? But you know, there was something more important than luxury on that first trip. And that was a sense of being recognized, being seen. I was a young man, and I was just a few years out of university. I'd worked as a community organizer in low-income neighborhoods in Chicago. I was about to go to law school, and when I came here, you know, in many ways I was a Westerner. I was an American, unfamiliar with my father and his birthplace, really disconnected from half of my heritage. And at that airport, as I was trying to find my luggage, there was a woman there who worked for the airlines, and she was helping fill out the forms, and she saw my name, and she looked up and she asked if I was related to my father, who she had known. And that was the first time that my name meant something, right? And that it was recognized. And over the course of several weeks, I'd meet my brothers, aunts, and uncles. I'd travel to Alego, the village where my family was from. I saw the graves of my father and my grandfather. And I learned things about their lives that I could have never learned through books. And in many ways, their lives offered snapshots of Kenya's history. But they also told us something about the future. My grandfather, for example, he was a cook for the British. And as I went through some of his belongings when I went up country, I found the passbook he had had to carry as a domestic servant. It listed his age and his height, his tribe, listed the number of teeth he had missing. And he was referred to as a boy, even though he was a grown man in that passbook. And he was in the King's African Rifles during the Second World War and was taken to the far reaches of the British Empire, all the way to Burma. And back home, after the war, he was eventually detained for a time because he was linked to a group that opposed British rule. And eventually he was released. He forged a home for himself and his family. He earned the respect of his village, lived a life of dignity, although he had a well-earned reputation for being so strict that everybody was scared of him. And he became estranged from part of his family. So that was his story. And then my father came of age as Kenyans were pursuing independence. And he was proud to be a part of that liberation generation. And next to my grandfather's papers, I found letters that he had written to 30 American universities asking for a chance to pursue his dream and get a scholarship. And ultimately, one university gave him that chance, the University of Hawaii. And he would go on to get an education and then return home. And here, at first, he found success as an economist and worked with the government, but ultimately he found disappointment in part because he couldn't reconcile the ideas that he had for his young country with the hard realities that had confronted him. And I think sometimes about what these stories tell us, what the history and the past tell us about the future. The corruption and cronyism and tribalism that sometimes confront young nations. That's recent history. But what these stories also tell us is an arc of progress. From foreign rule to independence, from isolation to education and engagement with a wider world. It speaks of incredible progress. So we have to know the history of Kenya, just as we Americans have to know our American history. All people have to understand where they come from. But we also have to remember why these lessons are important. We know our history so that we can learn from it. There's a proverb that says, "We have not inherited this land from our forebears, we have borrowed it from our children." In other words, we study the past so it can guide us into the future and inspire us to do better. You can't be complacent and accept the world just as it is. You have to imagine what the world might be and then push and work towards that future. Progress requires that you honestly confront the dark corners of our own past. Extend rights and opportunities to more of your citizens. See the differences and diversity of this country as a strength, just as we in America try to see the diversity of our country as a strength and not a weakness. So you can choose the path to progress. But it requires making some important choices. Democracy is sometimes messy, and for leaders, sometimes it's frustrating. Democracy means that somebody's always complaining about something. Nobody is ever happy in a democracy about their government. If you make one person happy, somebody else is unhappy. Then sometimes somebody who you made happy, later on now they're not happy. They say, "What have you done for me lately?" But that's the nature of democracy. That's why it works, is because it's constantly challenging leaders to up their game and to do better. Home anywhere you go. That's the Kenya that welcomed me nearly 30 years ago as a young man. You helped make me feel at home. And standing here today as President of the United States, when I think about those young people and all the young people in attendance here, you still make me feel at home. And I'm confident that your future is going to be written across this country and across this continent by young people like you. Young men and women who don't have to struggle under a colonial power, who don't have to look overseas to realize your dreams. I am here to tell you that the United States of America will be a partner for you every step of the way. God bless you. Thank you. Asante sana.